I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Call to Coach, Season 5, Episode 15, recorded on May 15th or May 5th, 2017. Call to Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this live webcast, we do have a chat room available for you right below the main video window. If you just look down there, there's a chat room down there. Hit the login button, bottom left-hand corner. Choose the guest account, put your name in where it says guest, and hit submit, and you'll be in. Today would be a good one to log into the chat room because you will have some questions, so we'd love to have those during the program. If you have questions about this webcast after the fact, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center for all your coaching resources and CliftonStrengths training needs. You can also catch the video and both streaming and downloadable audio for past shows, everything we've done in the past, and there's literally hundreds of them out there for you. Lots of resources on our resources page, and there's even a new topics page where you can search all the webcasts and all the blog posts we've done by topic. It's available on our coaches blog. Available for you for free, coaching.gallup.com. Dean Jones is our host today. Dean's the principal architect of Gallup's global client learning and strategy here at Gallup. Dean, great to have you back on Called to Coach, and welcome.
Yeah, Jim, thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
It's always good to have you. We're going to talk about preparing to coach today, but we've got some updates that we want to do for the community. We've had some notices go out and lots of chatter in the community. Can you give us a few minutes, a little rundown on and an update to the community?
Yeah, I'd love to. I think I'd love to. I think that'd be great. Many of you know that we just announced yesterday that we're going to be making a price change next week, end of next week, I think a week from today. And so, I wanted to, I'd love to just kind of talk about that for a minute, because I think it is, as we are making changes and doing things, I want to make sure that we, in addition to what we're doing, that for you guys as coaches, that you understand the why behind what we're doing, and that it really feels like it's clear for you all why we're making the changes we're making, and how we're moving forward, and kind of what's behind all that, and really how we're thinking about the future. Just to be super clear, we haven't changed our mission to really shift the nature of human development on the planet one bit. That mission is still the same. We're still committed, fully committed, that people all over the world, really, that when people think about human development, they think first about what's right with people and not what's wrong with people. And if you think about the conventional sort of understanding of development, it's mostly about what's wrong with people. How do I deal with my weaknesses? How do I develop myself in areas where I'm not strong, as opposed to starting with, gosh, what am I naturally great at? What am I naturally good at? And how do I invest in those areas? And how do I use those natural talents to be great? Part of our mission, as we were starting to kind of put the legs on that, part of it was that we started to talk about, hey, what if 1 billion people on the planet actually knew their strengths? That they could say, hey, here's what I'm great at, and that we had a network. The thing we got clear about as we started to build that was that we had a network of coaches that were making that possible for people. One of the things we got really clear about, and in fact, our science has subsequently validated for us, we know if somebody just takes CliftonStrengths, that they get a 7% improvement in performance, right? So we know that performance goes up just by taking the assessment. Right? But we know that where it really comes to life for people is when they have a conversation with another human being who helps them make sense of their strengths, develops their awareness and their understanding and their appreciation of their own talents, and starts to help them kind of invest in developing those talents into strengths. So we know that's really where it's going. So that's why coaches, right? That's why we said, hey, we got to start to build this community of coaches. Over time, I will tell you, there are a lot of us, I think some of you all think Jim might be the only one that goes to work every day thinking about coaches. And he does, by the way, just so we're clear, and at night and in the middle of the night, right? But there are a lot of us at Gallup, many of us at Gallup that go to work every day thinking about coaches and coaching and how we can have this kind of impact in the world. And so as we do that, we're thinking about like, what's the way to maximize that? So as not just for this year or next year, but literally decades forward. Many, Gallup's been in existence for, nearly 90 years now. And we're thinking not just about what's going to happen next quarter, but gosh, where are we going to be decades from now? So part of what we're trying to manage is the viability of all that, right? So what we decided to do, just to be clear about the announcement we made this week, was we decided that as of May 12th, we're going to increase the price of our top 5 codes. And we're increasing it from right now, it's currently $15. As of Friday, May 12th, it'll be $19.99. So we're increasing it from $15 to $19.99. One of the things we did as part of that increase, we looked at, by the way, we did a lot of study. We did a lot of analysis. We looked at who's buying those codes and how many are they buying and what's the impact going to be. And we looked at all that. And we did really some careful consideration to be able to look and say, what was the right thing to do as we continue to think about the future and the viability of all the investments we're making in the future around this, right? And decided it was the right thing to do to increase that price. We haven't, just so you know, increased the prices of top 5 for two years. It's about a little more than 2 years ago that we increased the top 5 codes. And so it's been a while since we've done that. Relative to that, the other thing that we decided as we did it was to make sure for our certified coaches, many of you are certified. If you're not, I hope this becomes a rallying cry for you to get certified, because I'd love for you to be certified. Beyond the education, it doesn't cost anything beyond the education. And I know the education is a big investment, but we decided to protect the pricing of codes for our certified coaches this year. So literally if you're a certified coach, you're still buying codes at the same prices for the balance of 2017. So we're trying to manage it so that, particularly for our certified coaches, that we're not making any sudden moves. We're getting it all set up so you can do that. So, and we want those codes we're not out to create a whole channel of code resellers. What we're really committed to is that discounted codes that we provide as part of certification is just one of those benefits of being certified. And we think there's a host of benefits. One of the things that we know is that there's certain things we do, like the Gallup Learning Series, that are just for our certified coaches. There's lots of things that we make available around the summit that are just for certified coaches. We really want it to be some really tangible benefits to being a certified coach. If you haven't heard, and I hope you have, certified coaches get a pretty deep discount on the digital kits that we just launched. And we've already had 520 coaches who've purchased digital kits using that special pricing. So we're trying to do a lot of things that send the signal to our certified coaches, hey, you're the ones that we want to continue to listen to and take care of, right? We also, for the coaches that are not certified, gosh, we'd love for you to become certified. We'd love for you to do our education. We'd love for you to become certified. So we're hoping that becomes a real incentive for people. We're also doing a lot of with this pricing kits, but with this pricing change. The other thing that I don't know if I think people kind of focused on the price increase of the top 5, but didn't really think about one of the things we just did is for everybody prior to May 12th that has purchased the top 5 code, the price of upgrading just got $5 cheaper. And so we changed the price of upgrading from $74 to $69. So it just actually got $5 cheaper for people to upgrade. So, and ultimately we'd love for people to upgrade. And I'm assuming that most of our coaches are working with people inside their All 34. So, like you'd want people to have their All 34. It literally just got $5 cheaper for people to do that, now. So, there is a little bit of a silver lining, I think, around the changes that we're making around that. The other thing that I think I just want to say on this, Jim, I don't want to belabor the point too much, but we're thinking every day about the future. And we're thinking about how we can support coaches and support the growth of the work that we're doing. And we're doing lots of meeting and planning to think about how we continue to kind of expand this in ways that are really powerful and useful, and to really empower the way that you all are thinking about and developing stuff around strengths. So we're not ready to make any announcements around that yet, but gosh, we're thinking, as we think about the future, we're really committed to that and really listening to all the ideas and all the thinking that we're getting. I had a call this morning with one of our certified coaches this morning, and he had a bunch of ideas that he wanted to share about it. I will tell you, we're just listening as much as possible to what everybody wants and needs. The one thing, and I don't know that this has always been clear about our mission, and I'd probably be the first one to admit, we've probably sent some mixed signals around this. For us, really, what we want to be, one of the things we want to be, probably not the only, but one of the things we want to be is the best place in the world for you to come to understand talent and strengths. And I think, as we think about talent and strengths, I really think we are one of the best places in the world to do that. I think we've got the most kind of groundbreaking research and thinking and practice around that. We also want to be one of the best places in the world where you can come to get an education on coaching. So those things, I think, it's not limited to that, but we really want to make sure that we are that place for you all. And hopefully you see that and hear that. We may not be the best place in the world for you to get education and coaching on how to set up your coaching business or how to convert leads and that kind of stuff. And because that's really, I will tell you, I think that's really not, as we think about the future, that we think there are people that will do that and do that really well. But for you to really understand talent and strengths, that's the place we'd like you to be. So I hope that helps in terms of kind of clarifying kind of our mission, our thinking. We are sure listening. I tell you, I was reading all the Facebook posts in the last 24 hours, and I get lots of direct messages from coaches. I get messages through Yammer. I talk to Jim Collison every day of my life. I think that's one of my best one of my best claims to fame.
That needs to be a little bit of a myth buster a little bit. Some people feel like when they're talking and I'm responding, that's part of my job, that it stays with me. And Dean, do I not send on all those? Yeah, we float those around to the teams that are making the decisions. And so don't feel like you're putting it on Yammer or you're putting it on Facebook and it's going nowhere. And then don't hesitate if you're not hearing from us. We've had lots of trouble with email, and email is the bane of my existence. And so if you're going to stay committed or stay in communication with us, I know it's hard, but if you're certified or trained, stay in the Yammer group. Set up some alerts to that, certified only if you're in there, or even in the network all. I know it'll create some traffic, but there's a lot of great conversations that go on there that you're going to want to be a part of. And so don't let those alerts go. Don't let them go away. That's just communicate. It's another way. I do everything I can, I think, all day and all night about all kinds of ways to communicate with you guys, whether it's through our webcasts or the audio podcasts that we make, or it's through Yammer, or it's through Facebook, or it's through Instagram. Micah is out making stuff on Instagram. We have our blog. We're doing everything we can to communicate with you. If I can't get an email to you, I'm sorry. It's one of those really tough things, but try to work with me and we'll plug you in a way that you can stay up to date. We want you to stay up to date with our stuff. Just the technology isn't always there to get it done. And I know some of you don't understand that, and you let me know, and I appreciate that. But we will. We do have really positive motives in trying to stay in communication with you guys. So if you do have questions, be sure to email me, ping me, IM me, whatever. I'm your contact, and I'll get you the right information.
Yeah, and Jim, I just want to make sure it's clear to everybody. When you're a certified coach, we do have an email newsletter that goes out every month, like clockwork, to our certified coaches. So we do, if we are using email in addition to all those other things, we do have that goes out. We try to make sure the stuff that we send out by email gets up in the Yammer group. So, but we do have that. If you're not getting that, like I will tell you, we have a bunch of coaches that we've been trying to reach whose emails are not current. So if you're not getting those, it could be that we just don't have your current email. So coaching@gallup.com is a great place to say, hey, look, you make sure that my email's up to date, right? Because we really listen to that. The other one is certification. If you're a certified coach, certification@gallup.com is another great one. Just either one of those will get to us, and we'll make sure that you're synced up with everything we got. Okay. So let's talk about the topic today. The topic, it was kind of funny. So I was talking to Jim over the last couple of days, and I said to Jim, that I knew it was coming up, and that I was going to be on Call to Coach again. And I said, Jim, what should I talk about? Like what is there? What should I talk about? There's a lot of things I could talk about. Sometimes I make lists of all the stuff because I've got Achiever in my top 10. I make lists of all the stuff that I'd like to talk about in the future, and sometimes I actually get myself overwhelmed with all the things I'd like to talk about. But I talked to Jim and said, gosh, what do you think is most relevant? And Jim said, one of the things that I see consistently is on Facebook, people post and say, hey, I'm about to coach this person. They have this combination of strengths, right? X, Y, Z, ABC, right? They have this combination of strengths. Tell me what I should say to them. Tell me what I should do with them. Tell me how I should approach them. What's the big insight I should give them? How do I coach a person who's got those talent themes, right? And Jim said, I feel like I try to say on a regular basis, hey, it's not so much what you're going to say, it's what you're going to hear. And it's the way that you're going to help them to understand their own talents versus that you're going to say something magical, right? And to which I agreed. That's absolutely right on, Jim Collison. And but I thought it really made me think a little more broadly about what are some of the things that I think, and this is my good advice, what I hope is good advice around as you're thinking about preparing for your coaching sessions with folks. How do you think about that? Or what do you do to prepare? And how do you go into those sessions really to, where should the focus be? Or where do you, they say that baseball players, again, I use sports analogies that I'm ill-equipped for, but they say that baseball players, when they're up at bat, they watch the seam of the ball to know which way it's spinning, And so as a coach, what's the seam of the ball to be watching when you're preparing for and conducting a coaching conversation? What's the seam of the ball to watch? And so I started thinking about things that I think are important. And in true fashion, I always feel like I try to come up with the 5 good ways to do this, or the 7 ways to be a better dresser, or whatever it is, so I want to give you kind of the things that I want to talk about today that I think you ought to be watching as you're preparing and thinking about those coaching sessions. One is, I think you ought to prepare. I know that sounds like a funny thing, but I feel like I always have to say it. I say it to our own coaches. I say it to our course leaders, that being prepared, there's just nothing like preparation. Preparation creates spontaneity. And we'll talk about that, but really being prepared is so important. I think listening is everything. I think it's just everything. And so I think that's really important. I want to talk a little bit about listening today. I think your job is always to ask great questions. And I think it's part of the job of a coach is, and coaches, there was an article that I saw recently that I thought was so cool about constructing questions, and I sent it around to a bunch of our course leaders and coaches. But I think being able to formulate great questions, we're all really, as coaches, in the question business, which is perfect for Gallup because we got an 80, 90-year history of asking great questions and then listening, right? So, it's really, for us, really, it's about, as coaches, it's what are the great questions we ask, and how do we really listen to how people respond to those questions? And then I think there's a couple things about reserving judgment, and really being able to make sure you're not listening through a filter, letting the conversation kind of unfold and using your strengths. So those are the things I kind of want to talk about today as we go through this. And as we go through it, as Jim said, I always love getting your feedback and your comments. I think those are super useful. So if you're on chat today, we got kind of an all-star lineup in chat today. I feel like we definitely got the A team in chat today. So if you would just type me notes as we go through this, or your questions, that's always useful for me, like that. So let me start talking about how to prepare. Okay. So I think in terms of preparing, one of the things, and this may sound a little bit like my rant on preparation, but I think preparation is everything. One of the things that preparation provides for you is that it really gives you access to being present. And when you're present on a call, there's just no substitute for being present on a coaching call. You've really got to be listening fully and completely. And when you're not fully prepared, when you feel like you're catching up or you're distracted, you can't really be present on that coaching call. So sitting down and really preparing is so just vitally important. There's lots of people that talk about how do you prepare for a coaching call, and there's lots of good thinking and good tips out there on it. So I'm not going to try to encompass the whole world of those tips. I will tell you a couple things that I think are important to do. I think it's really important, to the degree that you've got them, is to read people's strengths reports first and really go through and really understand. Like, I think it's great for me, and this is part of it for me, is I always read their top 5 report with the generic definitions every time, because I think getting grounded in what the standard definitions is just super important. Even if I've read them 100 times, it's a weird thing, but there's always something that kind of pops out as I'm thinking about that person and what I know about that person.
Dean, do you think that's the key part, is that you're reading it while keeping that person in mind?
Yeah, I do. And I think because context is so decisive, it's so important that that you're thinking about that person and thinking about what you know about that person. You're going to discover stuff, right, as you go through that, but really reading that definition through the lens of it. One of the things that I do, and I think is so important, is as you're reading the definition, I like one of my practices is I go through and make a list of all the traits that I see in that. Right. So I literally just make a bulleted list of what are all the traits that I see, what are all the patterns of thought, feeling, behavior that I see in that definition. Right. Because one of the things you got to remember is you're preparing, by reading that definition, you're preparing for how you're going to listen and how you're going to hear their talents come to life in that call. So if you're not clear about all the patterns of thought, feeling, or behavior that live in each one of those talent themes, that you're not going to hear it. And so part of it is getting yourself really clear to that. The other thing that I do that I think is so important is pull out those theme insight cards and pull out their top 5 or top 10. So you really got those in front of you. I think they're super important to just have in front of you. I look at their theme sequence. I like to notice like what's in the top 10 or 12 that I feel like I'm going to hear in their theme sequence. I also like to look at what's at the bottom. So as I'm looking at what are the things that are probably we're not going to see fire there, or probably aren't on their radar. So I like to be able to have those in front of me. So it's really thinking through all those pieces. And then finally, if I've got it, I read the Strengths Insight Report. And I like to read the Strengths Insight Report after I've done the standard definitions. So again, because what I'm looking for as I read the Strengths Insight Report is, how does the Strengths Insight Report compare to what I know about the standard definitions? How are their themes likely to be influencing one another? So the Strengths Insight Report starts to deal with theme dynamics and how they influence each other. And I would tell you again, typically when you're working with people, you want to start with those general definitions. I think those are the most important to start with. That people understand broadly what is achiever, not necessarily their variation on achiever that's in Strengths Insight, but that they understand kind of what is that generic definition of achiever, and then be able to look at themselves relative to that. So starting with those, I think it's, again, what you're doing is you're preparing to listen. I think there's this thing where sometimes strengths coaches, and you see this with a lot of, and I don't mean this in a deprecating way, but you see this with a lot of rookie strengths coaches, is they get on the call and they're kind of like a musician, or a magician. They're going to pull a rabbit out of a hat. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm going to tell, oh, you've got command. Oh, I bet you're this way, or, oh, you've got achiever. You probably like to make lists and cross things off. You know what I mean? Like you're probably really hardworking, like they will get on the call and say, you're probably this and you're probably this, kind of like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, right? That's not strengths coaching. Right? That is the Dionne Warwick Psychic Friends Network, right? You know what I mean? Like that's not what coaching is about, right? It's not about that you can say who they are, but that they can say who they are, that they see that in themselves, right? And it's always gratifying when you can say, oh yeah, I can look at your themes and I can guess a bunch of things about you. You know what I mean? But again, that's not the coaching that people require. What it leaves you with is it's almost like a parlor trick. You know what I mean? It leaves them with how great you are, not how great they are. It leaves them with that you knew who they were, and isn't the instrument really predictive, versus that they learn something about themselves and that they now understand their own talent better. So it's so important that as you think in the beginning, gosh, it's fun to be able to say, oh, you're this, this, and this. I bet you like to do this, or I bet you think this way. And they go, wow, how'd you know that? It feels good, right? But again, it's not really what our job is as strengths coaches. Our job is, and a lot of times we end up kind of laying stuff on people that they get stuck with. So it's really to be able to say, tell me about that. How do you tell me about that? Or, oh, you're achiever number one. Tell me what that's like for you. Do you like to do da-da-da-da? Or do you find yourself this way? So you're hearing how it manifests itself in them. I will tell you, I'm focus number 2, and I have a number of friends who have focus. And I'll tell you, there's 3 of us that I work closely with at Gallup, that all 3 of us have focus real high. And I would tell you, it manifests itself totally different in all 3 of us. It's interesting. One of my best friends is this woman named Sherry that works at Gallup. She's also high in focus. I'm high in focus. Her focus tends to be very task oriented, tends to be focused around staying on purpose and being very intentional in the moment. My focus, I will tell you, tends to be more long-term. It tends to think about where are we going? And it's because I think my focus is also colored by my strategic and my futuristic. So my focus manifests itself in a very fundamentally different way, right? And so it's one of those things where as you're preparing, it's not so much thinking about what you're going to say, but the thing you want to be able to do is be thinking about yourself as preparing to listen. Preparing, you're using your understanding of the themes to figure out what great questions you're going to ask, right? Because your job is to listen through the themes and ask great questions that provoke insights. That's your job there, right? Is how do I listen through the themes and provoke insights around that, right? So that people get left with a deeper understanding of who they are, their talents, and how they work.
And Dean, one of the things I know, I was being coached by Jackie Merritt one time, which is just delightful.
Yeah.
She always drove towards productivity. A lot of the questions kind of came out as far as what's making me successful, just not who I am.
Yeah.
But how is that leading to productivity? And so I always encourage, don't get in the conversations just to feel good or just to, predict or discover who they are. But how successful are you being in those things? Can you mentioned the 7% productivity. Why does that give that lift, and why is it important we talk about productivity?
Yeah, I would tell you, I think, and again, this is as you're thinking about, as you're starting to conduct the call, right? You're doing your preparation. You've done all this work where you're really grounded in that person's themes, who they are, and like that. Then I think a lot of it, the other preparation that I always think about is and I'm setting myself up to be on the call. One is thinking about, to your point, Jim, what do you know about their goals or their commitments? Right? So what are the outcomes that they're on the hook for, right? What do they want out of this? And one of the first questions I always ask when I'm on the phone with somebody or when I'm coaching somebody is, tell me what you want to get out of this conversation. What do you expect? What do you expect coming into this conversation? What do you want to accomplish in this conversation? And how do you think strengths, this conversation is going to impact the things that you're committed to in life? Because I will tell you, strengths coaching conversations are powerful in terms of self-awareness, but they're twice as powerful if I could say I walk out of it and I'm more effective in my life, right? So self-awareness is good, but self-awareness applied is great, right? And so it's really helping people think about how they apply that, right? So I think as you're thinking about it, is thinking about, gosh, what are the goals and outcomes that I know? And then starting the conversation where you can ask about those goals and outcomes, where people are. I think it's also being, as you think about that somebody's themes, that you have created for yourself a list of the kind of questions that you want to ask relative to each one of those themes, that you got some sense of those questions. And I always, I would say, I think we want to be a little fussy about questions. I think the kind of questions you want to ask are really great open-ended questions. questions that leave people a lot of room to be able to share themselves. You want to ask the kind of questions that are great open-ended questions that talk about, kind of where are they and how are they doing and like that, that help them to be able to really understand the kind of insights that they've got. So it's understanding the themes, thinking again about the themes. One of the tips I would say is looking at those standard definitions and unpacking a list of traits, looking at the theme insight cards, getting present to what may be barriers, what the barriers might be around that for folks. Really studying the Strengths Insight Report, thinking about theme dynamics and how those themes might apply to one another. In the Strengths Insight Report, I always think, gosh, if somebody's high input, but they have a lot of other like relating themes, it may be that their input is focused around people, right? As opposed to things or as opposed to ideas like that. A lot of times people are high input and have a lot of thinking themes. They tend to, some people with high input collect concepts, you know what I mean? So, sometimes people that have a lot of executing themes and are high input collect accomplishments, right? So, thinking about how those themes kind of marry with one another. So I'm thinking about all those things. I'm writing a list of questions for myself, and I'm thinking about kind of the goals and accomplishments that people have, right?
Dean, can you before we move on that, can you unpack that just a little bit more? Andrea is asking, that question that you asked them, what do you want to get out of this?
Yeah,
can you give some examples or what you've seen or what's the best practice on that?
Yeah, I always think, and this is funny, people don't end up in a coaching conversation with me by accident. They're not there. It's kind of like, well, I had nothing to do. I'm going to call Dean and get some coaching. You know what I mean? It's like it was either go get lunch or call Dean, right? No, they're there for a reason. And part of it is figuring out, what's the reason, right? And it's like, well, I wanted to learn more about my strengths. Well, why? What did you want to, what was it that caused you to want to learn a little bit more about your talents and your strengths? What are you working on right now? What are you grappling with? What are the goals and aspirations that you have? Like what's driving this? There's some underlying commitment or concern or goal or outcome that's driving that. And part of your job is to just kind of understand what that is, because that's then the anchor for development. That's where we're at. It's not just, there are some people out there that self-awareness is the goal, right? Enlightenment is the goal. But for most of us, if you go back to the kind of the principles of adult learning, one of the things that Malcolm Knowles way back in the beginning talked about was that adults learn, relevancy is so important for adults. Yeah, how is this relevant for me? Adults are very goal-oriented. Right? So how do I accomplish this? And they tie everything to what they already know and where they want to go. Right? So you listen, like for a living, I teach adults, and adults walk into and they lose focus pretty quickly if they don't think that what you're sharing with them is relevant to them, or if they don't see how they can apply it, or if it isn't consistent with the goals that they have. So part of it is being able to find out and really anchor everything that you're doing as a coach around what's relevant for them, how this is going to forward their goals and outcomes in life, how they can apply it. All those things are super important. And so I always just like to, I like to start out there to be able to say, okay, great, let's make this. One of the things that Jackie does, and I will tell you, Jackie's not the only coach that does this, but Jackie's great at this, I would agree, is making sure that you're anchoring everything on what's going on now and how this is going to advance what's going on now. So it's not some esoteric conversation. It's about like, hey, let's deal with how this conversation is going to advance what you care about, right?
When I met with her, my goal was to launch Polling Matters, the podcast. I wanted to do this podcast with Frank Newport. Yeah. And it was still in its early stages, and we were thinking about it, and it wasn't a for sure thing. And so one of the goals was, okay, how are we going to get down this process to get that podcast started? And it's just one of the things I really enjoy doing. And so it was a very concrete, we're in 6 months, we're going to do these things. And she didn't tell me what to do. She asked me, how are you going to get this done? And so it was just very helpful.
Yeah, no, and it's cool. It makes me think, Jim, of the work that we're doing in the advanced strengths coaching course now, right? And that we piloted it last year at the summit. We've done some internal pilots of it. We're going to do another pilot this year at the summit. But I think that there's the early stages of being a strengths coach when you're working with somebody is all about awareness and understanding and acceptance. Do they understand their talent profile? Do they have good awareness of how their talents fire? And do they have some fundamental acceptance and appreciation of how they're wired? Right? Relative vis-a-vis their talents and their strengths, right? But then there's this kind of pivot point where it becomes about applying your talents and developing them into strengths. And that's the other, and I think to my way of thinking, much more satisfying and gratifying aspect of coaching, which is how do I help somebody make the choice to focus on their strengths, to focus on who they are, their talent, and oftentimes it's letting go of other things, which can be challenging for folks. And then how do I help them start to invest in those and applying those in meaningful ways? And I think that's a whole other aspect of coaching, which is not just about, hey, I'm aware of how this works, but then how do I apply this in really meaningful ways? And it is just like athletic coaching, just like musical coaching, it's like technique and application and all those great things, developing skills and adding knowledge and all those things that make it really powerful, right? So let me go back. I think so as you're coaching folks, we've talked about establishing a relationship, knowing what the person wants to accomplish. The other piece about that is really finding out where they are. It's an interesting thing. I would tell you sometimes coaches try to coach people where they're not or where they think they should be. And it's about, it's like tug of war. I'm trying to get you someplace, right? Part of your job as a coach is just to kind of live, is to really go where they are. And part of what I will tell you great coaches are doing is trying to assess where somebody is at the beginning of the call. Where are you in relative to your understanding and your awareness of your talents? What's your level of self-awareness? How do we kind of move that forward? And people move at different paces. So some people may move mountains in a call. Some people may move incrementally. Either one is fine. But your job is not to lead what you think the coaching call should be, but to start where they are and lead a coaching call. Coach them in a way that really meets them exactly where they're at, right? The way you will do that is early on in the call, creating trust and relatedness. The foundation of all the work you're going to do with them is trust and relationship, right? Building the relationship that you've got sufficient relationship, starting to build trust. Sometimes people think that takes time. Honestly, it can just happen in an instant. Is building that kind of relationship. I know lots of people, and Jackie is one of them, but she's not alone in that. There's lots of great coaches that I know that build that kind of instant rapport, that kind of instant relationship that then becomes the foundation over time for great coaching. So that's really an important piece, right? As you're coaching somebody, I think that the most powerful tool that you've got is the way you listen. And I think managing your own listening is super important. It's not what you're going to say in the call. It goes back to the beginning of where we started here. It's not about the magical insight you're going to produce out of your bag of tricks, right? But it's really about you being able to listen powerfully, committedly, intentionally to what someone is saying. That you're fully present and you're listening through the lens of talent. The biggest gift that you've got is that your listening is a particular listening. It's informed by talent and strengths. It's informed by your understanding of talent themes. It's informed by your understanding of how talents develop into strengths. So that's the biggest gift that you've got, is the way that you listen and your intentional, fully present listening, committed listening to the way someone's speaking, right? I always think, and I think one of the big gifts we've gotten from Dr. Don Clifton is the clues to talent. That you're really listening, I think, beyond just listening through the themes, is that if you go back to Soar With Your Strengths, where you're listening through the lens of those clues to talent, so that you can really listen to where is talent present. You're listening for what is the expression of their talent? Where do you hear the expression of their talent? What comes naturally and intuitively to them, right? So where do you see just kind of that natural, intuitive, kind of fast learning there? What's deeply satisfying for them? What's the thing that you can see that as they talk about what they're doing and they talk about their talent, that stuff that they go, gosh, when I do this, it is who I am. You know, for me, there's certain things like teaching where I would say, gosh, that is what I'm born to do. It is deeply satisfying for me. The other things is like, what are they drawn to? What, like a yearning over and over and over again. What are the activities and the thinking? What are the kinds of things that you notice over and over again they love to do, they're drawn to, they keep getting pulled into? What are those things that are like yearnings? What are the things that are glimpses of excellence, where you see excellence in them, where they just do something and wow, they just shine, right? And they can see that they shine. What are the places where things just come fast to them? They're just natural. There's just great, fast learning, right? In other words, they just get it. So thinking through that lens of clues to talent, as you're listening through that, you're listening for, even beyond the talent themes, where do I see the talent naturally occurring, and helping to be able to support that. Those are the kinds of things that you want to poke at in a conversation. Tell me more about that. Sounds like that was pretty intuitive for you. It sounds like that was something that was pretty valuable for you. Sounds like that you love doing that, and you just get that kind of timeless quality of flow when you do that, right? How you want to poke at those things in the conversation. Your job is to help them become aware. Your job is to help them appreciate that that's a talent of theirs. Your job is to help them think about, how can I do more of that and apply that in a meaningful way? How can I invest in that? The thing you want to remember, and man, I tell you, I see this every day of my life now. People take for granted what they're most good at. The stuff that comes easy, oftentimes people just take for granted. It's like it's transparent for them. It's like, oh yeah. You know, it's funny. There's this woman I work with who is absolutely a genius at sales, but she wants to do everything in the world except for sales. And it's the funniest thing. And she is brilliant at it. But because it comes easy, she doesn't value it as much as some of the other things that are harder for her to do, right? We tend not to value those things that come easy or that we're really good at. And it's a funny thing about how human beings are wired. It's like that stuff. It's like, oh yeah, I know I have genius musical talent, but I'm going to go be a rugby player, right? No, right? Like, take that stuff that you're naturally good at, capitalize on that, build on that. One of the things I do as part of my job is I coach some of our sales managers around the way they develop people. And, it's really helping those managers to see, hey, look, if somebody is great in a particular area, don't try to make them well-rounded. Help them do more of what they're great at, and then to help them to understand where their genius lies, right? Part of the reason that we take for granted what we're just naturally good at is we assume that everybody can do what we can do, and they can't. We're all super unique, and man, if after studying strengths you haven't figured that out, it's like we are all super unique. I'm married to somebody who's high in empathy, and he can actually go and he'll just be with somebody and he can tell exactly the whole world of what they feel, right? I am just not gifted with that. I don't have that, right? And I have a friend who can walk into a room and like immediately gauge the level of consensus because that person is high in includer. And I don't have that gift, right? We all don't have the same. We are not gifted in the same way. We can't all do the same stuff, right? But we assume, it's this funny thing about us. We assume that we are, right? We assume that everybody sees the world. It's like, hey, why don't you see that there's not consensus in the room? Well, I don't have that gift. I don't have that talent, right? So we tend to, those things that are the most powerful gifts for us, we tend to take for granted. So it's helping, I think, as a coach, really help people to really understand, hey, no. You've been doing this since you were young. It was a no-brainer for you. But let me tell you, your talent on that is remarkable. And that's your unique gift. And you need to do more of those things, right? So it's helping become aware, helping people appreciate it, helping people understand all the dimensions of it, and helping people then to apply it in really meaningful ways that to what you said, Jim, against performance, right? Against excellence. How do I apply this in ways that really give me access to greatness? Last kind of points I want to make around this. And by the way, if you guys have questions relative to this, relative to the content, let me know. I hope this is useful for you around this. I would tell you, as you're going through a coaching call, one of the things that you want to, and I find this with myself because I've got command number 10 and self-assurance number 11. So I want to tell people the way it's going to go, and I tend to be a little right about that. I will tell you one of the things that's really important that I would tell you, and maybe this is just coaching I give myself, right? And is I think it's really important to listen. I think we have a tendency to listen through the filter of our talents and strengths. And sometimes we want to shape the conversation around what makes sense to us versus listening for the integrity, the wholeness and completeness of what's happening with that person, right? There's that thing where we want to shape it through the lens of what we think is true or what we see versus listening for the integrity of the design of their strengths, right? So it may not fit your picture as you're listening because you're listening through the lens of your talents. But if you listen, there's a fundamental integrity to the way people's talents fit together and who they are and how it's kind of come together. There's this fundamental integrity about it. And you got to listen for what that fundamental integrity is, as opposed to listening through, well, I would do it this way, or I think this, or they're missing this, but it's related to your sense of the way things should be, or the way you see the world. You got to make sure that it really fits for them and fits the integrity of who they are. Sometimes you see coaches that leave people stuck with stuff, right? You should be this. You need to be more this way. You need to be less that way. This is something you need to manage. This is something you need to express more. If only you were a little more this. People, and these are good, well-meaning coaches. These are not the bad coaches. These are the good coaches, the good people. But sometimes we leave people stuck with stuff because it's based on kind of our sort of sense of what it should be versus really understanding the integrity of who somebody is and how their talents fit together. I always think about their talents like a puzzle that all fits together perfectly. I don't know if like this sounds funny, but over holiday break at the end of the year, over our Christmas break, we always like to put together puzzles in my house. And you put all the pieces on the kitchen table, and sometimes you're sure that there's a piece missing, but at the end it's like it didn't fall off the table. It's all right there. It's just figuring out how all the pieces fit together perfectly. I think listening to somebody's talents, and particularly their top 10, 12, 15 talents, is kind of like that, right? Is you're looking at all the edges and how they all fit together, and there's this kind of fundamental integrity for that. And part of it, as I think the more you coach, the more it becomes more interesting and fascinating. The more you see it, and the more you get engaged in seeing it. Right. The other thing that is just kind of a cap on this conversation is that you got to remember that coaching, it's all a process at the end of the day about self-awareness. The person you're coaching always in the conversation, in the coaching conversation, that person is all about understanding themselves, who they are, and how they can apply their natural talents. And you always have to make sure that that person is at choice in the conversation. You can't take away their choice. You can't leave people with stuff. They've always got to be choosing to participate in the conversation rather than just being told the way it is. So it's so important that it's moving, that the conversation meets them where they are. It's moving at a pace that's comfortable with them, that they're managing that flow in that direction, and they're always about choice in the way they participate. That's such an important piece. So last thought, I guess, before we wrap here, Jim, is I think that your biggest talent for yourself, or your biggest gift for yourself as a coach, are your own strengths. So one is, I always tell coaches, gosh, your best laboratory is yourself. So developing your own talents and strengths is a great education on how talents and strengths develop. So if you're not working on yourself, I always think every coach should have a coach, but you got to be working on yourself in the development of your talents and strengths. So you've got to be at work on that. You've got to be engaged in that. You've got to be self-aware and noticing how that process kind of comes together, and use what works for you, not just being but you don't want to be limited by it. You're going to be able to see the world through the lens of your strengths, but the more you know your talents and strengths, the more you can see beyond them. Right? So the more you're aware, oh man, that's just my competition firing, right? You can recognize it and transcend it, right? So the piece is really, the more you're developing yourself, the more you can own your strengths rather than having those talent themes own you. You can own those, and the more powerful you are to be able to kind of transcend those. So hopefully this has been helpful.
Yeah, I think a good process, Dean. We'd had some questions that came in. One of them, Andrea had asked about, and we'll shift gears a little bit to the summit, right? Summit's coming up July 17th, 18th, and 19th. If you go to CliftonStrengthsSummit.com, all our courses are available 15% off right now if you go out and look, have a peek at those. Andrea was asking, she'd attended the advanced course last year. We're offering that again this year. How different are they, and would someone do it again, Dean? You've architected that, so how does that come together?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly could, right? So here's what we did is, after we did the advanced strengths coaching course last year, that was the first time we had piloted that material. And I think we told people, we had like 42 or 43 people in the room, and we said, gosh, this is a little bit of an experiment in terror. Like, this is the first time we're really talking about this material outside of the folks that we've worked with inside our organization. So, and I think, I mean, the folks that were in the room will be the judge, but I think it went pretty well. The biggest overriding thing, the feedback that we got out of that one was it was so much material we couldn't really do it justice in a day. So one of the things we did is we expanded the course to 2 days. So it's now 2 days of going through those 7 milestones. For those of you that don't know, what we tried to do with the Advanced Strengths Coaching course is taking all the information that lives sort of behind the accelerated course. So all the thinking we had done about the way people develop their strengths, all that thinking and all those approaches that live sort of behind our curriculum, and now bring that into the foreground so we could teach coaches that. So that's where we came from. Part of it was we introduced what we call the first 7 developmental milestones that are kind of the milestones that people kind of pass through as they develop their strengths or encounter as they develop their strengths. The other piece of feedback that we got, Jim, was people wanted more skills development as coaches. So one of the things that we're doing is we're adding a set of skills that we think are fundamental kind of coaching skills. So lots of different techniques. So we've expanded the course to 2 days. We're still covering the 7 developmental milestones, but we're slowing it down a little bit so we can really do them all justice. We're also adding a whole set of skills development pieces to it, so that we've identified, I think, somewhere between 7 and 9 core kind of coaching skills that we think coaches should have. And we really see this as the beginning of our second tier of development for coaches. So things that come after the accelerated course. So by the way, we do say that people need to have either completed the accelerated course or have completed our curriculum in order to do that. You don't have to be certified, but you have to have completed our curriculum to be able to do that. I think somebody just asked, SP Parker just asked, can you name some of the skills? Yeah, sure, certainly. There are things like reframing, there's things like bottom lining, things like that we think are fundamental, something we call sliding doors. So there's different kind of skills that we would say that are coaching skills that you ought to have in your reflective listening, responsive listening, things like that we think are great skills that you ought to have relative as a coach in order to be able to coach effectively, right? The other thing that's part of kind of the advanced work that we're now doing with coaches that we're launching is, and I mentioned it on one of the Call to Coach sessions, I think I mentioned it during the Gallup Learning Series, is many of you know that we have an entry-level course called the CliftonStrengths Discovery course that we do with organizations all over the world. And we've had it literally for decades. Since about 1999, we've had this course. We recently in the fall redid the course, and to make it more robust, included new research in it like that. One of the things we're doing at the summit is we're doing a train the trainer for it. So we're giving this curriculum to coaches. And so, this is really designed to be able to give this curriculum. A lot of coaches lead these kind of training sessions inside organizations or for groups, whether it's faith groups or education groups like that. And a lot of them are building their own curricula around this. Part of what we decided to do was take this curriculum and make it available. So we're doing a 3-day train the trainer. It's the first time we will have done it. We're piloting it. I'm leading it along with another couple of our senior leaders around it. You have to be a certified coach to attend. So you have to be certified before you can attend this. And there's lots of cool stuff. It's a 3-day course. I promise people are going to get tons of value out of being in the course. The other thing that comes with it is we give people will get certified out of being in that course to be able to lead that course. We do ask people sign a leader agreement around it. And in addition to the course content that we're going to give them, the facilitation content and like that, we're going to set people up to be able to do their first session. So we're giving people materials to deliver the course to 50 participants as part of being in the course. So all the information is on our courses.gallup.com website. So if you go to courses.gallup.com, you look at the CliftonStrengths Discovery Train the Trainer course at the summit, all the information is there. As always, if you guys have questions, you could certainly reach out to Yam or reach out to Jim. If you've got feedback on any of this kind of stuff, you're welcome to reach out to me at dean_jones@gallup.com.
All right. I think that, Dean, I think that gets us through. We're just a few minutes till, and we covered a lot of stuff. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it?
Let me just see if there's anything else. No, I think that's it. I'm like, as always, I just want to say, gosh, I'm just so appreciative of our coaches. I really like, even when we're in the midst of change, people are great and generous. And I really appreciate the partnership with our coaches and how great you guys are and the sense of mission and purpose that you bring to your work every day. And thank you for the work that you're doing to change the world. I will tell you, I'm just deeply grateful and deeply appreciative for each of you and the work you do and the way you do it.
Yeah, and I'll echo that as well as we wrap it. I wouldn't do what I did if I didn't like it. A lot of people say, like, you're on all the time. Well, yeah, I want to be. I mean, again, it's one of those things. This position didn't exist at Gallup before I started doing it. And so I appreciate you guys out there, and we love your feedback. We love hearing it. Be honest with me. Many of you already have, and of course, we appreciate that. And we take every amount of all that feedback we bring in and consider. It's a big ship to move sometimes, and we can't always move overnight, but we are moving to make it a better experience, and we are listening. Some things move a little slower than others, and we'll just continue to work on those to make it a great experience for you. Thanks, Dean. Appreciate your time here today, and we'll look forward to. I know many who are listening will look forward to meeting you at the summit, and that will be a great time. We'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just GallupStrengthCenter.com. Send us your questions or comments, or if you got any questions on this and you'd like to send those in to us, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. We'd love to have and hear from you from that standpoint. You can also catch recorded audio and video to this program, as well as a lot of our resources that are available. We have a tab on our blog that's just called resources. It's everything that we have there. If you're wondering what you have access to, head out to coaching.gallup.com and click on the resources tab. Dean mentioned the summit, and if you want to attend, CliftonStrengthsSummit.com is the way to get there, and we'll look forward to seeing you there as well. If you found this helpful, please share it. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and we'll look forward to the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.